Good afternoon. Welcome to the Remember and Explore Subcommittee meeting of the Advisory Committee on Arlington National Cemetery. I am the committee's designated federal officer. This is a virtual meeting and present in support our alternate designated federal officer, Mr. Matt Davis, Deputy Chief of Staff, Arlington National Cemetery, Mr. Robert Quackenbush, Officer General Counsel, Mr. Justin Buller, Dr. Allison Finkelstein, historian, Arlington National Cemetery, and I believe Lieutenant Colonel Petra Papavasiliou, ANCG 5. This virtual open subcommittee meeting is pursuant to the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, codified in 10 U.S.C. 7723. The subcommittee operates under the authority and provisions of the Federal Advisory Committee Act of 1972, Chapter 10, 5th U.S. Code, and the Sunshine and Government Act of 1976. Additionally, the 41st Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 102-3.150. Arlington National Cemetery is the agency that receives the benefit of the committee's advice and recommendations. ANC provides a designated federal officer nominated by the executive director and appointed by the administrative assistant to the Secretary of the Army. ANC will provide administrative support to the committee. Subcommittee members are reminded not to conduct formal business by deliberating on any substantive matters which are already before the committee for a vote as a whole. Additionally, the subcommittee will report to the committee any recommendations or information relevant as of today's work. Once again, this meeting is open to the public. However, members of the public are not allowed to present questions from the floor or speak to any issue under discussion by the committee without prior approval from the committee chairperson. If you have not already done so, I would ask all the guests to ensure their cameras are inactive. Please make sure your cameras remain inactive and their microphones are muted. The public joining us today virtually is asked to place their name in the chat in order for us to record your participation in today's open meeting. If a member of the public seeks to be recognized, please do so using the hand raise feature and wait until you're called upon if approved by the subcommittee chair. If a member of the public seeks to be recognized, speak so, and is addressed, please do so by using the terms over and state your name when you begin speaking. Members of the public were eligible to file a written statement or request to make a verbal presentation in accordance with the published Federal Register notice. Members of the subcommittee have been provided the statement received as of this meeting, and we have several individuals that have asked to speak. If I can ask everyone to please mute your devices. The Federal Register notice can be found on the ANC website at www.arlingtoncemetery.mil. These proceedings are being digitally recorded, and a summary in written form will be made available to the public on the ANC website. At this time, please give your attention to Mr. Mark Farley, the Remember and Explore Subcommittee Chairman. Mr. Farley, sir.
Yeah, Renee, thank you very much. And as the chairman of this group, I'm pleased to be here today, and please call the meeting to order and conduct roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Sir, you also still have an echo, so if there's another device in your area that is giving us an echo, I might ask you to mute that. For the record, the following members are in attendance. Secretary of the Army nominee, Mr. Mark Farley, Chairman. Ms. Rose Duvall. Mr. Nick Miller. Mr. Robert Hess. Secretary of Veterans Affairs nominee, Ms. Rosemary Freitas Williams. And
Present.
Secretary of the Army, thank you, ma'am. And Secretary of the Army nominee, Mr. Gerald Torrance. Following members are not in attendance. Secretary of the Army nominee, Miss Ann Harrell. Chairman, based on the subcommittee members in attendance today, we have a quorum. At this time, the floor is yours for any opening comments to the subcommittee.
Yeah, Renee, I had to mute my computer completely, so I'm just going to dial in from the phone here for a minute till I try to work through it. But hey, subcommittee members and members of the public, thanks for joining us today as we discuss and get some updates on two very hot topics for Arlington Cemetery that we're trying to address and get to closure. The first one that we'll talk about, I think, is going to be the Chaplain's Monument, and then we'll talk about renaming of Jackson Circle. Again, I just remind the public, as Renee has indicated, please ask for permission to speak via the raised hand portion on the MS Teams system, and we will get to you as we recognize you. So, Renee, other than that, I think we just need to go ahead and get started, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, today's the August 23 meeting minutes have been provided to the committee members. Additionally, as I noted, we had one written submission to the committee, which has been provided to the subcommittee members. And additionally, we have 5 individuals requesting to speak to the subcommittee today during our public comment period. Mr. Chairman, today's meeting consists of old business from the prior subcommittee meetings. These topics include a presentation on road names for the renaming of Jackson Circle and deliberations on a commemorative work proposal to add names to the Protestant and Catholic chaplains' monuments at ANC. At this time, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Arlington National Cemetery will present the topic for your consideration related to the required renaming of Jackson Circle, which surrounds Section 16 at Arlington National Cemetery. As the committee is aware, the Army and ANC have been directed by the Secretary of Defense to implement the congressionally mandated naming commission recommendation to rename this roadway by 31 December 2023. This subcommittee and the parent committee are essential in the master planning and memorialization of roads at ANC. We look forward to your thoughts and recommendations. Mr. Quackenbush.
Good afternoon, committee members and members of the public. I'm Bob Quackenbush, the Deputy Chief of Staff. For those that don't know me, I've worked here at Arlington Cemetery in this position since 2016, after retiring from 30 years active duty in the United States Army. I'll be taking you through several options that the ANC staff has developed for your consideration today in renaming Jackson Circle in accordance with the DoD Naming Commission's recommendations. If you go to the next slide. On this slide, you'll see a quote from the President's Memorial Day address back in 2009. And the mandated renaming of Jackson Circle provides us an opportunity to share the legacy of someone who can meet the ideal that's defined in this quote. Next slide. So one of the last part of the Arlington National Cemetery's mission statement requires us to immerse our guests in the cemetery's rich living history. This road renaming effort for Jackson Circle provides us a unique opportunity to continue to tell Arlington National Cemetery's story. As we look at our history and how we can best interpret this history for our visitors and stakeholders, we keep coming back to 2 expressions that we use here at the cemetery often. The first one is that Arlington National Cemetery's history tells our nation's history. And the second one is that every headstone tells a story. In the last 150 years, we've done a good job of telling the stock history of the cemetery since its establishment in 1864. We tell part of the Custis family story. We tell Robert E. Lee's story at the cemetery. We tell the story about the expansion of the cemetery on several occasions over the years, and the stories of those heroes who are interred here. Yet the property did not start in 1864, and a good portion of our history has yet to be told here. The way we look at the cemetery and how we capture in the past, how we've captured our existing road names doesn't necessarily tell that entire story. And so what we are trying to do is offer some alternatives that help to do that better, and you'll see that in the next slide, next few slides. What I'd like to first do is, if you can come to the next slide, is talk about the Army's criteria for memorialization. And we've taken some key quotes that talks about memorialization in Army Regulation 1-3 that highlights some important distinctions for us to use as criteria. First, that we should only be memorializing deceased personnel. The second quote there is really the emphasis to try and represent all segments of our society. And then folks that whose careers or actions are important in the locality here where we're going to memorialize them. And then finally, the Army emphasizes both valor or distinction, and I wanted to highlight that. This regulation mainly focuses on garrisons and installations and not roadways, but we feel like the criteria is important to capture as we move forward in our own recommendations today. If you go to the next slide, in addition to the Army's recommendations or criteria for recommendations, the ANC staff has developed some criteria for the candidates that we're going to offer you today, and we've highlighted several unique characteristics that we think are important as we move forward with selecting our name. When you look at the column that's labeled racial ethnic minority, we're talking about not just racial and ethnic, but perhaps religious and other minorities. We'd like to capture someone who has some unique relevance to the cemetery itself. If you look at our existing road names, they're very much focused on our senior officials and senior officers in the military. We'd like to see if we can make that find someone that maybe is more junior ranking that we can highlight for their valor or distinction. And then here at ANC, the Army and the Navy are very prominent in the road names here. There may be an opportunity to highlight other branches of the military that have evolved since the creation of the cemetery. Women, of course, are not very well represented here, and women constitute a large part of our service in the military today. And then there's a column that discusses distinguished service to the military. And note that we did not say distinguished military service. We wanted to highlight that because some of the candidates aren't necessarily military veterans, but have served the cemetery and served the military in a distinguished manner. And a criteria that we thought you should consider is, are these candidates honored elsewhere? If they are, then perhaps it's less compelling to nominate them for here. So as we go forward, we'll present the candidates, and I would offer the committee members, this might be a good method for you to kind of evaluate the nominees yourselves. Next slide. So why are we going the direction in which we are headed? We've done several surveys in the last few years here at Arlington, and what we have come to find through the surveys of visitors here, and specifically when we ask the question, do you feel like your community is represented here at the cemetery? A significant portion of the respondents have stated the answer is no, they don't feel like it's represented here. And the groups that we are surveying are representative in a significant percentage of minorities. And when you look at our current road names and the road names that we have in terms of representing minorities, the statistics are up there. Despite the fact that minorities currently make up a greater percentage of our military than is represented nationally, our roads don't currently represent those minorities who have and are serving. We think this is important today for one key reason. Our recruiting in the military is suffering today. For the last few years, the Army has not met its recruiting goals. The other branches of the military are having similar struggles. And with the minority serving in the military today, we think we have an opportunity with road renaming to help make minorities feel like they're represented here at the cemetery, and that might assist with our recruiting effort. Okay. If you go to the next slide. These are this is the current representation of roads named here at Arlington Cemetery. We have 7 roads named after U.S. presidents, none of whom are buried here. So none of the roads are named after President Kennedy or President Taft, who are buried here. They're named after other presidents, many who served in the military. We have one Secretary of War Weeks, who was instrumental in the creation of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier concept. A significant number of the flag officers, 19 of which are buried at Arlington. The vast majority are Army officers. We do have 10 Navy admirals that are honored here, 2 Air Force generals, Generals Arnold and General Mitchell, who really were part of the Army Air Corps. General Arnold did finish out his career as part of the newly created Air Force. And then we have 2 lower ranking officers, Major Pierre L'Enfant, who designed the city of Washington, D.C. He is interred here. He was reinterred here after being discovered in a cemetery in Maryland. And then the Capron family is named here, which was an anomaly naming by a superintendent in the early 1930s after the Capron family. The superintendent today would not have the discretion to name it after a family. And then we've got only 2 NCOs that are named, have roads named after them, Sergeant York and Gifford in the New Millennium section. And one female, Ms. Ida Lewis, who served in the U.S. Revenue Service, which is a precursor to the Coast Guard. So that's our current representation here at Arlington Cemetery. So if you'll go to the next slide, what we have are 8 candidates for your consideration, and we'll talk about each one in the subsequent slides. And then we have another slide that talks about alternatives for renaming Jackson Circle, not after an individual, but perhaps concepts, and we'll talk about that as well. All right, we'll go to the first candidate. First candidate is James Parks. For those that aren't familiar with James Parks, he was born enslaved at the Arlington plantation. He was here his entire life as a child, as a newly freed person, and then as an employee of the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps. For those that aren't aware, the Army Quartermaster General maintained all of the nation's national cemeteries up until 1973 with the creation of the National Cemeteries Act. So James Parks was one of the earliest Quartermaster Corps civilian employees following the Army's occupation of the property. When you look at his life, he was part and parcel of the first 70 years of this cemetery's history. And he was here to witness the construction of the Tanner Amphitheater, the Memorial Amphitheater, the interment of the unknown soldier. He was here. He certainly participated in the interment of the sailors that are interred around the mast of the USS Maine, and the interments of many of our nation's heroes throughout its history. He was here during the expansion of the cemetery from its initial 200 acres in the northern part of the cemetery to the then extending to the west and then to the south to where the cemetery's southern border is today. He lived during the time when Freedman's Village was on the southern part of the cemetery on Jessup and Clayton Roads. And his service was noted so strong that the Secretary of the War at the time rendered him full military honors. He died in 1929, and one of his last key roles was he was vital to the restoration of Arlington House in 1925. He was one of the few persons living that had firsthand knowledge of what the house looked like before, during, and just after the Civil War, and was able to provide that knowledge and expertise to those that were restoring the property. When you look at his life from being born enslaved to his death in the 1920s. He is very much emblematic, just as much as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is emblematic to represent all of the unknowns that have been interred in national cemeteries and elsewhere across the globe. James Parks is emblematic of the transition of all African Americans from enslavement to freedom, and through the Reconstruction era of our country. And so that's why we nominated him as our first candidate. Our next slide. So the other next name is the Syphax family name. When you look at the Syphax family, it is a family that is still prominent today in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area. Mariah Syphax, for those that aren't aware, she was the daughter of George Washington Parke Custis. She was the half-sister of Mary Custis Lee, the wife of Robert E. Lee. As she aged, George Washington Parke Custis enabled his daughter's freedom, and he eventually gave her 17 acres of the Arlington plantation on the property that is now known as Henderson Hall, the Marine Corps base. In the early 1900s, the Army took that property back as under eminent domain rules to create the Henderson Hall base. And all of the Syphax family had to be relocated to either East Arlington, Queen City, which is now where the Pentagon and the Southern Expansion site will be located. Some moved elsewhere. And the family's grave site, their family plot that was on the 17 acres, their family's remains were disinterred and reinterred at a gravesite over in Eastern Maryland. If you look at the history of the Syphax family here at Arlington, many of the descendants of Mariah Syphax have served in the U.S. military, and you can see that they are buried here at the cemetery, to include all the way back to the U.S. colored troops, Douglas Syphax, to more recent descendants here in Section 2. So the Syphax family is one of several descendant families that are here at Arlington. One thing to consider about the Syphax family name in the descendant community is it may be appropriate to name a road after the Syphax family that is closer to where their family plot was geographically, which is right now currently near the Southern Expansion Project. So that's another consideration that you may want to think about. Our third candidate, if you go to the next slide, is Milton Holland. Milton Holland was a Medal of Honor recipient in the Civil War. He was born enslaved in antebellum Texas. His mother was an enslaved woman, and his father was Byrd Holland, who eventually rose to be the Secretary of State for the state of Texas. When the state seceded from the Union, Byrd Holland joined. He left the Secretary of State position, joined the Confederacy, and lost his life in a battle out in Louisiana. I forget the name of the battle. After Milton Holland's birth, his father freed him and sent him and his two brothers to Ohio for schooling. In 1861, when the Civil War began, Milton Holland, he attempted to enlist in the United States Army, but at that time, African Americans were barred from military service. In 1863, when the United States Army decided to establish the U.S. colored troops, Milton Holland did enlist, and he eventually rose to the rank of sergeant major, and he led his regiment. He assumed command of his regiment during the Battle of New Market Heights in 1864, after all the white officers were killed in the battle. He received a Medal of Honor for his bravery that he displayed during that battle, and he lived until 1910, where he was buried here at Arlington National Cemetery. He is buried in Section 23, which is just across the street from Section 16 in Jackson Circle. Okay, our fourth candidate is Alexander Augusta. He was born African-American, born free in Norfolk, Virginia in 1825. Even though it was banned in Virginia at the time to get an education, he worked to obtain an education, and his desire was to pursue a medical career. In the early 1850s, he went out to California and tried to enroll in medical school out in California, but he was denied that privilege at the time. So he elected to go to Toronto, Canada, and he enrolled and graduated from Trinity Medical College after 6 years of schooling there. For several years in the 1850s, he stayed in Canada, worked as a doctor. In 1861, when the South seceded, he moved back to his adopted hometown of Baltimore, and he wrote President Lincoln asking for permission to serve as a doctor for the U.S. colored troops. He was granted that honor, and he was the first African American commissioned as a medical officer in the United States Army. In 1863, he was led the Freedmen's Hospital. He was the administrator of the Freedmen's Hospital in Washington, D.C. He was known as the very first African American hospital administrator in United States history. After the Civil War, he continued to practice medicine, was on the faculty of Howard University, and he taught there until his retirement. One thing I did want to note is that Alexander Augusta was recently honored by having the hospital at Fort Belvoir named in his honor. So the Fort Belvoir Augusta Medical Center is in his name. So that's a consideration using the criteria since he is honored elsewhere. Our next candidate is Ruth Lucas. She is African-American woman, and her distinction is being the first African-American woman to be promoted to colonel in the United States Air Force. She enlisted in the Women's Auxiliary Corps in World War II. When the Air Force was formed 2 years after the war ended, she transferred from the Army to the Air Force, where she remained for the rest of her life. She was an instrumental educator in the Air Force and that later on in the Department of Defense. And upon her retirement, she continued to teach and work in education. She basically worked for the precursor to the University of District of Columbia. She taught at the Washington Technical Institute, and she retired in 1994 as the assistant dean of the University of Washington, D.C. She died in 2013 and is interred here at Arlington. Our next candidate is Lee Archer. Lee Archer is an African American who left New York University in 1941. He always wanted to be a pilot, but he was initially denied that in the early parts of World War II because they weren't accepting African American into pilot training. Later on in December of 42, when they established the pilot program at Tuskegee Army Airfield, Lee Archer was accepted. He graduated #1 in his class from flight school there at Tuskegee, and then subsequently deployed to the European theater. During his tour in the European theater, he was awarded both the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Air Medal, and he was noted for being one half of a kill. To become an ace, you had to shoot down 5 aircraft. He was credited with 4.5 kills, just half of an aircraft shy of becoming an ace. After serving in World War II, he remained in the U.S. Air Force and stayed on and retired as a lieutenant colonel in 1970. One of the famous Tuskegee Airmen. Our 7th candidate is Lieutenant General Frank Peterson. Frank Peterson he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1950. This was an era in which African Americans were just being integrated into the military, and he was inspired to become a pilot after the loss of Navy Lieutenant Jesse Brown. He was the first African American pilot to graduate from flight training. He lost his life in December 1950 up near the Chosin Reservoir when he was shot down. If you might remember Jesse Brown's story, in that Lieutenant Hubner received the Medal of Honor for crash landing his airplane to try and get Jesse Brown out of his airplane after he had crash landed. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Brown died But Frank Peterson used that inspiration to go to flight school. He was one of the earlier African American graduates. He was the first Marine Corps African American pilot, commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1952. Between Korea and Vietnam War, he flew over 350 combat missions, which is a high number of missions for any aviator. He was exceptionally awarded. He earned the Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit with Combat V device, Distinguished Flying Cross, Purple Heart, several air medals during his combat flying. He is noted as becoming the first African American general in the United States Marine Corps, where he was promoted in 1979. Obviously, notable service, and he was interred here a few years ago after he passed away. Next slide. And our last nomination from these 8 candidates is Catherine Murray. She is noted for being the first female Marine to retire from active duty. She joined the Marine Corps Women's Reserve during World War II. She enlisted after Pearl Harbor, and she served an honorable career throughout her 15 duty stations and wrote a lot of training manuals for the Marines. She's one of a small cohort of the original 50 women who were allowed to stay on active duty after World War II. So we wanted to offer her as a potential nominee. So if you go to the next slide, you can see on this slide how the ANC staff has evaluated the candidates that we've offered for you. We've honored and highlighted those 2 that are honored elsewhere, Alexander Augusta and Frank Peterson. So that's just our scoring for you to consider. You can choose your own scoring. Next slide. We have some other alternatives if the subcommittee does not think a name is appropriate. Some concept names that we've captured here on the top. I believe the Reconciliation Circle was one that was requested by the committee. I would caution that the ANC staff would advise to not use Reconciliation Circle, as that's become recognized by historians as the reconciliation really occurred between the white Northern Americans and the white Southern Americans. And the reconciliation really came at the expense of African Americans' rights, segregation, Jim Crow laws, and things like that. So we don't believe that that is a good name to consider. Freedom Circle, we do have Freedmen's Village, which if you're not familiar where it was located, from 1864 until the early 1920s, when the cemetery was expanded to the south, Freedmen's Village was located on Jessup Drive near the Coast Guard Monument where Admiral Perry is buried, and around up on Clayton Drive. And right now we are intentionally going to be doing some interpretation of Freedmen's Village as part of our agreement with Arlington County when we did the road transfers from Arlington County to do our southern expansion. We're going to intentionally do some historical interpretation of Freedmen's Village at the intersection of Clayton and Jessup. So it may be more appropriate to highlight that name there. If you don't like concept names, then perhaps horticulture themed names. Section 16 is known for its red cedars, so possibility of using red cedar circle. Throughout the cemetery, we have maples, oaks, hollies, and cherries, so those may be other names as well. However, we at ANC believe that we have a great opportunity to select one of the individuals and really use that individual's history to help interpret the history of the cemetery and the history of our nation. So that concludes the briefing. If you have any questions, I am here to help answer.
If I may, thank you so much, very, very much for the presentation and the briefing. Really well done, and the staff should be commended for their research and proposed their proposals. I wanted to submit that I was especially inspired by the story of Milton Holland. Milton Holland, one, and I'll tell you why. First, as a long-suffering communicator, it's important to be able to tell the story of the New Circle name in a brief sentence, right? So we should not have to explain too long what the new meaning or why it happened. So when I looked at brevity, but also Milton Holland was a Medal of Honor recipient. So we're really saying the highest honor available. That the cemetery chose someone with military service, but of the highest honor. That was very appealing. Also, there was this kind of interesting tie, unless I have my history wrong. I believe the battle at Newmarket, where he was where he had a field promotion. That's the same battle of VMI that VMI is famous for, where all the cadets fought at Newmarket, and I'm looking at Jerry, and I'm getting a head nod, and I'm hoping I've got it right. I'm waiting for someone to tell me I'm wrong. So it actually is a very rich, interesting story, and I hope it's not the wrong story. But the one place where the sculptor is from VMI. VMI is heavily emotionally and historically tied to this battle, where Milton Holland received a remarkable field promotion, and went on to receive the Medal of Honor. So I'm captivated by that. It's a short story. It's concise, but also it has terrific meaning to anybody who has served, or those who honor people who serve, like the folks who believe strongly in preserving the memory of the Confederate side of the Civil War. So I'll stop there. And thank you again.
Miss Williams, this is Bob Quackenbush. I would like to make sure that we distinguish that he earned his Medal of Honor at the Battle of Newmarket Heights, which is different from the Battle of Newmarket.
Okay.
And
Outside of Petersburg.
The Newmarket Heights is outside Petersburg, whereas Newmarket is the one that's just up the road from VMI. So I just want to make sure we captured that distinction.
Thank you so much for the clarification. And having family in Petersburg and a husband who went to VMI, there are quite a few miles between the two. So thank you very much. But I'm sure not. But again, a Medal of Honor recipient, I think, bestows a level of honor on the circle that I don't know if we're going to get in some of these other wonderful, wonderful submissions. Thank you. Over.
Mr. Hess.
Yeah, hey, so, and to kind of follow up on that, again, I do think there are some good candidates. But the one thing that was interesting about Milton Holland was that not only did he win the Medal of Honor, that he went on after that to become a very successful public servant, and also went to Howard University, got his law degree, was the first first African-American to get into the bar. So I think there's some other things, there's a great story of, going from being enslaved to joining the military, receiving the highest honor, and then continuing on and continuing to better himself and better the community. So I think he is there. I mean, I enjoyed looking up and looking at the history of all the candidates. But this is one that I think that really, when you're talking about telling a story, I think this is a really good story to tell. Over.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. I just had a question on Milton Holland, specifically on the matrix. There was a open space around significance at ANC, and I was just curious if you could double click on why he was not selected for that versus some of the others.
Well, all of the others are buried at ANC. So all of the candidates are interred at ANC. So they all have that unique significance. But the only two that had unique distinction related to the cemetery would be James Parks because of his history of being born on the property, spending his entire life working for the Army on the property during the earliest years of the cemetery through the construction and dedication of the amphitheater and the Unknown Soldier. And then the Syphax family, due to their unique history of the property itself, the 17 acres that was part of their land, the descendant community of the cemetery. That's the reason why those two were unique as it relates to Arlington National Cemetery. The other candidates, while they are all interred here, just like James Parks and several members of the Syphax family, they didn't have any unique history related to the cemetery itself.
Gotcha. Okay, so burial itself wasn't unique to the history. Okay, and then the other one was I was just the NCO checkbox. Is that missed there, or am I thinking about that checkbox wrong for him? Because I also was drawn to his story, frankly.
So I failed to say in the criteria is when we looked at for officers anybody below the rank of colonel, and for enlisted soldiers anybody below the rank of sergeant major. I'm not, that's a distinction that we chose. If you disagree with that distinction, that's certainly within the right of your opinion.
Gotcha. So because he was a sergeant major, that was not in the NCO categories. How you put it up. Okay, thank you.
Right. When you look at the military funeral honors that we have here at Arlington, there's a distinct cut line for sergeant majors and for colonels. Colonels get the comparison horse. Sergeant majors get honors that other enlisted don't get. So
definitely appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, so this is Mark. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Renee, give me a second. I'm gonna turn my phone off here. All right, can y'all still hear me?
Yes, Sergeant Major.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So I was able to get on to another computer, and I'm now dialed in via the computer on everything. And I know we've already opened it up, but at the end of that briefing, we were supposed to open it up for the subcommittee discussions, and you all have already done that. What I would like to do is see if there are any other subcommittee members that would like to chime in at this point. And while we're doing that, if the Arlington team could please put the criteria back up for just a brief moment so that we can look at it as any other subcommittee members may have comment, and that'll help us stay on target and stay focused a little bit. Over.
And Mark, I have a brief point of information. The cedar tree is a symbol of eternity. So if all else fails, red cedar circle is also a viable option, in my opinion. Over.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I think we'll get to that here later on when we get to our deliberations. I see Rose with her hand up, so I'll pause and let Rose make her comment. Over. Miss Rose.
Mr. Ball, I think you might be still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just wanted to make the point that we are changing a name, correct? Jackson Circle, for another name because we've had a social pendulum swing. So are we not sort of still feeding something that we're trying to avoid by giving it, using another person's name? Well, I say that because I look at all of these names and they all have fantastic stories. They all would be great selections, but we can only have one. So I look strongly at Freedom or Liberty Circle. And Cedar Circle, only to avoid down the road when the pendulum swings again and they say, we don't like the names that were chosen by this group in 20, 25 years or whatever, and we go back, or somebody will be going back, changing the names again. That's all, just an input.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, hey, Rose, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that perspective also. I think the conversation that we had prior with Rosemary and then Bob drew my focus more to the Medal of Honor, Vice, all the other check marks that we now look at on this criteria sheet. I mean, that's the nation's highest honor for a military service member, which is really what Arlington National Cemetery is about. It's about the remembrance of the ultimate sacrifice by our service members in service to our country. Gerald, I don't want to continue speaking without letting you the opportunity or at least a confirmation that you don't have any comments to make at this time. Over.
Well, let me chime in here on Rose's comment. I think you guys have known me long enough that I'm really adverse to highlighting melanin in skin. This whole concept of race, and although these candidates are outstanding candidates, like Rose, I'm a little concerned that we're swinging with this woke pendulum, where we're nominating mostly people with melanin in their skin to satisfy some current social drive. And I would therefore lean more toward a more general name. I like liberty and freedom because that encompasses everyone in the United States, and it's not melanin skin specific. I don't even use the word race because I think race is a false term. There's only one race, is the human race. And so I would go with what the committee sides with, but I would probably lean more toward, I really like liberty and freedom, to stay away from this social drive that can go sideways in the next couple of years.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate, yeah, thanks, Jerry. I appreciate that too, sir. So here, what I recommend is, because we're gonna, as we conclude later on today, our ultimate goal is to make a recommendation as a subcommittee to the full committee. But before we deliberate to that level, and I asked you guys for your recommendation, we have a public comment period that we have to get to that may help inform our decision. So what I would do is I would like to turn it back over to Renee at this time so we can get to the public comment period, listen to their input, and then we'll come back to the subcommittee voting on a recommendation, if we're going to make one, to the full committee at their next meeting. Over. And I'll stand by if anybody's got any issue with that. Over. Renee, hearing none or seeing no hand raised, I'll turn it over to you for public comment period. Over.
Thank you, sir. So ladies and gentlemen, this time we will open the floor for approximately 30 minutes to the members of the public who have requested to speak to present comments to the subcommittee in accordance with the published Federal Register notice. I'm going to call on them by name. But before we begin, I want to ask the public to be respectful of time and manner of presentation, noting that at any time, if the discussion becomes disruptive or inappropriate or beyond the time limit, the speaker will be muted. We ask each member of the public, when called upon, to please clearly state your name. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and that's to allow those that have requested to speak enough time. We will provide the speakers a 30-second warning in the Teams chat feature. I'm going to apologize in advance for any mispronunciation of names. And I will ask, Mr. Torrance, sir, your hand is still raised. If that is not needed, I ask you to lower your hand. And I see that I have one member of the public. Thank you, sir. I have one member of the public with their hand raised. And if time allows, we will, I assume, Ms. Siegel, you're requesting to speak during this public comment period. And if the time allows, we will allow you to speak as the last speaker in the time period. So this time we will begin. The first individual is Mr. Gene Kaiser. Mr. Kaiser, are you with us? Mr. John Coffindaffer?
Hello, this is John. Can you hear me?
We can, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel John Coffindaffer, United States Air Force, retired, 21 years active duty, 14 countries, 4 wars, 2 major offensives, combat air rescue pilot, Air Force. It was quoted today that Arlington tells our nation's history. And if that's indeed true, why are we erasing our nation's history? Something else that comes to mind is that, you know, statues have been taken down, bases have been renamed, but why has recruiting not increased? I don't understand. It should be exponential, that they would, minorities, everybody just be beating down the doors. Everything with all these great changes that have taken place. You know, several times it's been mentioned as well as, it's been mentioned as well that surveys to visitors were asked if your community is represented there at Arlington. And, you know, for recruiting purposes and everything, that maybe that would help in regards to minorities recruiting. But I go back to the removal of the statues, the removal of quotes, grinding off of quotes on granite throughout our bases, throughout at West Point as well. Why has not the recruitment problem changed? So do you really think that changing the names of Jackson Circle is going to really have an impact upon recruiting? Let me tell you, I've lived, like I said, in 14 countries, served our nation in 14 countries, and I've seen Marxism. And we are pandering Marxist cancel culture here. This road is nothing more than a road that does not tell our nation's history, but eliminates Southern history, culture. It's Southern genocide, in short. Thanks for listening to me. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Edwin Kennedy?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Good. Hi, my name's Lieutenant Colonel retired Ed Kennedy. I taught on graduate faculty 19 years at the Army Command and General Staff College. My specialty was Civil War history, so I taught the graduate course in that and the electives, among others. But I have a real problem. One of the gentlemen just stated a few minutes ago that Reconciliation Circle is at the expense of African Americans. And I just really have a hard time with that because I don't see any substantive evidence of that fact. It doesn't mean that African Americans weren't marginalized, they weren't mistreated, but that doesn't have anything to do with their rights and the expense of their rights by naming it Reconciliation Circle. Let me just make a point here. 1863, for the first time since the American Revolution, Black soldiers were allowed to serve in the U.S. Army. They served in other conflicts, but they were officially enlisted in the U.S. Army beginning in 1863. For 85 years, until after World War II, they were officially segregated in the U.S. military. Government policy officially segregated for all those wars for 85 years. So does that mean that everything having to do with the Indian War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II needs to be re-looked now because it was at their expense that our monuments were put up? I've been around the country and seen 24 different monuments. None of them are integrated, except the Vietnam Memorial in Washington. So the World War I and World War II monuments and memorials, all I've seen are all white soldiers. So now do we go back and wash all this too? We're opening the door for stupid decisions on history. The history's done with, it's over and done with, but to go back and say we have an excuse because the mistreatment of blacks in the military and in our culture, now we have to rename things because of hurt feelings is just wrong. And I would say look at 1863 to 1948, and if we're being honest, everything that has been named or memorialized on monuments now needs to be considered to be correct, because that's what we're doing. This is Marxism to satisfy a small number of people who claim offense, and it's just wrong. So my black friends who have ancestors that served in the Confederate Army are offended that this is going on because they have a stake in this, but they've been overlooked. They've been marginalized because it's not politically correct to talk about it. And I can tell you right now, Al Arnold, who's a good friend of mine, has written 3 books on this. He's black, and he's very proud of his ancestors.
Sir, I'm sorry, your time's expired, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Robert Floyd. Robert Floyd. Donald Smith. Donald Smith. I'll do one more call for Gene Kaiser. Linnell Siegel. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, please. Ms. Siegel? Yes, ma'am, thank you. All right, I will give one more call to Mr. Gene Kaiser. Mr. Kaiser? Mr. Robert Floyd? Mr. Donald Smith? Mr. Chairman, that concludes the public members who have asked to speak, public comment period. If you would allow, I would like to at least provide the public in attendance an understanding of the Federal Advisory Committee and the committee's charter as it relates to actions and timelines for publication of documents.
Please do, Renee. Thank you.
Yes. So for the general public and for the committee members, as a reminder, this is a subcommittee. The subcommittee reports to the full committee of the Advisory Committee on Arlington National Cemetery. Reports that are submitted, for example, activities and actions that were completed at the last meeting that were directed towards the Secretary of the Army. Those actions are from the full committee and not this subcommittee. So this subcommittee is focused on providing input to the full committee at their next deliberation meeting in the coming months. Each committee has a total of 60 days to complete minutes. And then we have 90 days to complete reports that are submitted higher than the committee. So if I would ask the public's patience, if you're looking to see something that occurs in a committee meeting, you will generally not see those published on our website for public display until at least 60 days after a meeting for the minutes, and then probably more like 90 to 120 for something that has to go forward to the Secretary of the Army. Mr. Chairman, I think that ends our public comment period. With your permission, we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, Renee, if I could, though, I do want to relay and thank the public for their comments. Some of them were spot on from the subcommittee members' perspective. Yes, this is very hard. It's very painful at times. We love your passion and we share it. But at the end of the day, the subcommittee will make a recommendation to the full committee in one way or another based on our deliberations and vote later on. But I do come to you again with thanks and admiration for you dialing in and providing your input to the subcommittee and helping inform our discussions and deliberations. So with that, Renee, I do recommend that we move to the second topic. And let's have a discussion, or I'm sorry, before we have the discussion, let's get the update on the Chaplain's Memorial initiative that's before the subcommittee. And then at the conclusion of that update, we'll continue our deliberations for the subcommittee meeting. Over.
Mr. Chairman, as a reminder, there is no update. The committee members have the last briefing that was presented to the committee as reference material, but there is no additional presentation to be made. At this time, the next agenda item is turned over for your use to revisit the discussion. We do have the slides. We can show the slides if you would like to see them. We can show them to you.
Yeah, go. I'm sorry, Renee. Yeah, I'm so used to seeing the slides, and we have them here. So yeah, if you would just
have a hard time with this. You don't fix or perceived wrong by doing the same wrong. That's just ludicrous. And removing a name by replacing with another name because this person's melanin in their skin, to me is just tragic. I'd rather leave it like it is, but if we have to come up with a recommendation, then I would go again. I would really urge us to do something that's more universal, like liberty or freedom, or even the red cedar. But but you don't fix a perceived wrong by doing the same thing. And this road that they're trying to lead us down, I think it's self-destructive. And as a member of this committee, I think we need to take a stand against this. And just tell them no, we're not going to recommend that we continue this kowtowing to this social disease that's currently infecting our nation. Over.
Thanks, Jerry. Rose or Bob?
I don't know. Hey, if I stepped on Bob's toes, sorry, Bob. My thoughts are the same in that I know that the direction was to rename Jackson Circle. And as I look at this, I look at the alternatives that the Arlington staff came up with under the concept names. Just a question, and I don't know if somebody there is still there that can answer this. Other than freedom and liberty, which are the two that are here, which resonate with me, is that his area historically significant to the establishment or the origin of Arlington in any way? And I ask that question only because would Arlington Circle be appropriate? But I don't have enough history to say yay or nay. I don't know. I pass that over to you. Over.
So ma'am, if you give us a few minutes, we could bring up the original, we have a map that shows the various area, how the cemetery expanded. So if you give us a few minutes, I could show you that, and we could show you where Jackson Circle is in relation to that, if you would like. As it relates to a general name like Arlington, as you go, and we can try to answer your question in that manner. Over. Can you?
Hey, while they're doing that, I'll speak. I'm with Jerry. I think as we deliberate here and before we adjourn, it's my intent to get us to a vote to make a recommendation to the full committee. Because I think that's why we're meeting today, is we have to make a recommendation. We don't have to do anything, but we need to make a recommendation to move this item along the agenda, right? So we can continue to move, because there is a time limit. So I'm based on what Renee shows us here in a minute, and I'll let you ponder it while they're doing it. But I think what I'll ask you to vote on is that we recommend, and I'm just going to throw these out there, and then you change them as you want. A short list of 3 names, and the first name on my recommended list would be Jackson Circle, and then the second name would be Liberty, and then the third name would be Red Cedar. And if you want to replace any of those with something else, I'm okay, but I'm with Jerry. We are allowed to make a recommendation as a subcommittee, and I think we recommend that the madness has to stop somewhere. And they can, of course, they'll tell us that our recommendation is not accepted, and they'll do what they want to do. But if the subcommittee feels strongly about it, like I've heard a couple of us say, then I think we stand our ground, and we try to do the right thing if we think it's the right thing. Over.
I think this concept of not compounding the error is really, really rich and important. Over.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, Bob.
I would, first of all, just tell Jerry roll tide, but I do agree, and I'm not, I'm not doing it for any other reason except for, we say that Arlington's about telling our history and teaching our kids and the next generation and the generation after that. And if we're forced to change the name, then I'd rather change it with something that, and you know, we mentioned Milton Holland. You know, I think he has a great story. And it's not anything that is controversial. And I think it's someone that came out, they served our country, and did, you know, kind of live the American dream. You know, went from being enslaved all the way to being a very successful lawyer. I think that's a good story. But I don't want to change the name. I think it's a mistake to do that. But if we're going to change it, I'd rather change it to a good news story than just something that is, how does Freedom Circle tell the story of Arlington National Cemetery and what it's there for? I don't know, that's just sort of my opinion, but I do agree that changing the name, I think, is a mistake. But if we're going to change it, I'd rather change it to a story that can be told that everyone can resonate with. Over.
Yes, sir. Fair enough, Bob. Understood. We'll come to agreement before we all leave here on what that short list is going to comprise of. And again, like I said, I have no issue with Milton. It's a Medal of Honor recipient.
Pull your cursor down, Dad.
So let's look at this document that they've got now drawn up, and then we'll come back to it. We still got a few minutes left in this, quite a few minutes, if you will. I mean, based on our time schedule, we got enough time to discuss it further if we need to. So Renee, I'll turn it back over to you, ma'am.
So Mr. Davis pulled up for us the map of kind of the expansion of Arlington National Cemetery over time. You'll notice, Matt, Matt has his cursor right now over Jackson Circle as it sits today in section 16. So, but in the 1893 era is when that area of the cemetery that area of property became part of Arlington National Cemetery.
But all of that property was part of the original Lee plantation. Is that right? Correct?
That is a true statement.
Okay. That's I think what the question
It was
was.
part of the Custis. And then
Custis Lee,
later.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Does that scratch the itch that was asked there for? I think it was Bob that asked the question. Was it Bob that asked that question, or
Ms. Duval, sir?
I'm sorry, Rose. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I'm I'm a supporter of what you have said, in that the recommendations we put forward, maybe Jackson Circle, Liberty or Freedom, either one, and the third, Great Cedar. Obviously, the full committee is the one that will make the final decision, but at least we've given them some options.
Okay, since I made the first, recommendation of a short list, and again, I'm not tied to 3. I'm not tied to a number. I don't want to give the full committee a recommendation that requires many hours of deliberation over too many names that we offer. So I would like to just keep it short, as short as possible. And so I threw my 3 recommendations out there. I'm not tied. I'm not going to fall on my sword for any of them except number 1, which I think is the stand that the subcommittee, from my point of view, needs to do. But I don't have any issue with Milton, as I said, because of the Medal of Honor. What struck me just now when they threw the map up that rolled into my head, one of those immediate thoughts, was if we have to rename it, maybe we just name it 1893 Circle. And that's the year it was part of the cemetery. And the other thing that stood out to me is the prominence of the Dagblame statue in the middle. I mean, it stood out in that map. There's no doubt you can tell where it stands. So, you know, I don't know, maybe 1893 is a little too germane, but so I open it up. You guys, we can modify the list. I got a scratch pad out here. I'll renumber them as you want to deliberate it. But Farley's vote is Jackson Circle's 1. And let's hash out number 2 and 3. And if we want to go to 4, I'm okay with 4. I would not like to go any higher than that if we don't have to. Over.
I concur on your first choice. Over.
Yeah, I think on the first choice, I'm stuck with the idea is, are we recommending Jackson Circle, or are we simply saying the cemetery or the committee recommends to avoid weighing in on the renaming because the political sensitivity of this unresolved issue, that the pendulum is swinging back to what Rose is saying?
My perspective is that we leave it alone. It's not that we're punting it. It's just that it should not be changed. Over.
Yeah, so it should not be renamed, right? Okay, I think that's where I was getting at.
Right, that it's the best course of action. Over. That's my interpretation.
Yes, ma'am.
Mark, I concur with your list there. Jackson Circle being number 1. I'd be okay with just saying Jackson Circle, period. But I wouldn't go more than 3. I think 3 is the right number. I think 4 gets a little cumbersome. Over.
Good. Thank you, Jerry.
Mark, I guess this might be directed to Renee. Has Arlington been told they need to rename it? Was it suggested it be renamed, or was it identified as one that must be renamed?
Arlington National Cemetery is taking a non-discretionary act. We have been told it will be renamed. So the subcommittee can make whatever recommendations necessary, but we have been directed to implement the naming commission recommendations, and that essentially is a mandate from Congress. The reports went to Congress. Congress did not act against those reports. So the recommendation of renaming both Lee Drive, which was changed to Custis Walk, and Jackson Circle, those were the 2, Lee Drive and Jackson Circle, the 2 we were directed by the commission to change. Jackson Circle will be renamed. Regardless of the advisory committee's preferences to the name to stay, we cannot do that. That is not within our authorities. The Secretary of the Army doesn't have the authority to not rename it. So
he would have to go back to Secretary of Defense, or he would have to go back to Congress?
Back to Congress.
Okay.
So I hear you loud and clear. So we're back to
But then,
Jackson
first of
Circle's
all,
off.
let me make sure I'm clear. That does not tell the subcommittee what you should or should not do. It's still you're your own entity, and you can make your own recommendation forward as you deem and see fit. Over.
Thank you. So our recommendation goes to the full committee. They in turn are getting the same marching orders. So we should give them the 3 that we feel are representative of that particular monument and how it came about and what it stood for. Over.
I got you, Rose. I'm good. So any recommendations to change the list as I proposed it? I got me and Jerry, I think, have concurred with these 3 names. And Rose, I got you, and I see I was watching you shake your head. I think we remain independent of Arlington, and we make a recommendation that all of us can look ourselves in the mirror tomorrow morning and lay our head down tonight that we did what the subcommittee was required to do, and that was make a recommendation as an independent body. Over.
Yeah, it seems to me, Mark, the issue is the way this whole structure was created. It was Congress was hands off. Congress created a commission, and then Congress said, once the report comes back, we have 90 days to act. And if we don't act, then they're final, right? And so in this scenario, then the Department of Defense has been forced into bringing the cemetery into a very divisive issue, which you could argue the fact that names like Jackson Circle exist in the cemetery create division. But you know, the concept was the pendulum has swung, and now we're creating more division, and we're not healing. Is that you know? And so I still feel pretty firm that, you know, I almost feel like the recommendation is to encourage the committee to recommend to the secretary to avoid implementation of the naming committee without congressional directive, like without a congressional action. Because I mean, from my side, I think you're dragging the cemetery into a political, and frankly, this committee into some type of political situation that isn't becoming of the cemetery. So that said, if that's not recommendation one, then, you know, I do still feel Milton Holland and perhaps Freedom Circle are the names that would go forward. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think the recommendation of not renaming Jackson Circle is good. But if full committee needs an alternative, then we can give a conceptual one, which is either freedom or liberty. And then I guess Sergeant Major Holland as, hey, if you want to provide an individual that represents a good story for Arlington, then you have those two, you know, then the full committee, I think, can choose between the two. But those would be my three. Over.
I generally concur with you, Bob, unless we want to make a fairly strong statement that we'd like to avoid a name entirely for the good of all. I just submit that as a concept or a question. Over.
Okay. I did that little bit of awkward silence, but hey, I would comment to Nick, you know, I think we've all been drug into a political discussion of not our choosing, right? And so I'm gonna do, you've taken it from the way I've kind of discussed it thus far. I think, yeah, we're all in it, but you know what? We're entitled to make a recommendation to the full committee. And I say that knowing that as a member of the full committee, I'm going to have to deal with this again, as some of you will, right? That are on the full committee. So I'm making a recommendation to myself that just going to deliberate this again. I think as a subcommittee that owes a impartial, fair look back to the full committee, that we don't worry about if it's political or not. It's what we believe. And if we believe that we're contributing, you know, the other thing that flashed through my mind was, you know, do no harm, right? And I think, you know, you're stuck in a rock and a hard place, right? No matter what we do, we're going to cause harm to something. We're going to cause harm to the full committee by saying, hey, look, we recommend you don't do anything, and we don't even change it. But then, you know, we cause harm to some entity, regardless of the name we pick. So I don't want to shirk our duties. I want to make a recommendation. Like I said, I'll fall on my sword for number one, and I'm okay with changing either 2 or 3 to any other name that all of us can agree to, because I think that's what it's going to require, is that we have to come to an agreement to make a recommendation. If not, then I'm going to have to report to the full committee that the subcommittee cannot come to an agreement on a recommendation on the renaming of Jackson Circle. Over.
So Mark, I think, and thank you, perfectly put. I do think, however, that regardless, we are in the middle of a political discussion, and we're not going to be able to remove ourselves from a political discussion. So I think that our recommendation is actually based on intent. We intend to pick a name that stills the waters, that causes people to stop the vitriol and move on in a way that is the least disruptive. So I think it's our intent, but we're not going to be able to sidestep the political piece, is what I'm saying. Over.
No,
Well
and
said.
by the way, I'm not suggesting we could either. I hope that's clear. What I'm suggesting is back to what you said, Rosemary, which is, okay, in that situation, what is the least disruptive recommendation? I think is the right way. And I agree with what Mark said, which is, the approach is do no harm. And of the choices, which of these minimizes the harm?
Yeah, Rosemary, well said. And so look, just so we can move it on, I'm going to ask you all to vote on my recommendation, and then that gets it in the record. So in the minutes, and then we move from there, so that when we're all said and done, we do have a recommendation, or we just continue to disagree on every name we put on the list, and then we'll not make a recommendation. But so I'm going to ask you to vote on Jackson Circle, Liberty Circle, and Red Cedar Circle as the first three, first round over the ballot. Over. Rose, your vote?
I concur.
Nick?
I'd like to see a name in there, so I'll say no.
Okay. Rosemary, ma'am? I think you're still muted, Rosemary. I didn't hear you.
No, I'm internal deliberations. I do like the slate. I do think we're going to be asked for a name. If there's an allowance for a fourth, not to further complicate matters, I would say that if they have to have a name, it would be as described by Nick. But I'm happy to vote yay for the slate as written.
Okay. Bob Hess, sir?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to have a name. Like I said, I think Jackson Circle, and then whatever Freedom, Liberty, whatever one we want to call, and then a name. And like I said, I think we all think from the list that was provided that Sergeant Major Holland would be the name. But so I think one of those, I think that combination, and then at least we give, when you go to the full committee, if Jackson Circle is the throwaway course of action, now you can work through the other two. Over.
Fair, Bob. Thank you. And Gerald, I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, Mark, I concur with your recommendation as stated.
So no
Okay,
name.
so, all right. So based on that vote, that would be 4-2, with 4 concurs being Farley, Rose, Rosemary, and Gerald. And then Nick was a non-concur, and then Bob recommended adding Holland. I believe Bob recommended adding Holland in lieu of Red Cedar. Is that what everybody copied over?
Yeah, I'm actually on the same camp as Bob there, Mark, which is, add Milton Holland and figure out conceptual. So if there's a fourth one, I'm good. Or just put me down with Bob.
Okay, so to try to get a consensus, not a majority, if we replace Red Cedar with Holland and go with Jackson, Liberty, Sergeant Major Holland, would everybody in the subcommittee concur with that 3-name submission as a recommendation to the full committee? Over.
Concur.
All right, got it. I see Bob, Rose, and Nick. You shaking your head? Yes or no?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'd like to see you add some language about how we deliberated here and the concerns all up, but otherwise I'm good with the names.
Yeah, we'll clean up the language, Nick. I mean, but the recommendation for the short list will be those three names. Jerry,
Well, I think by providing an actual name almost gives them an escape valve, and kind of limits our, at least in my opinion, it weakens our position to stand firm where we are, because we give them an escape valve by giving another name. So replacing a name with another name, which is this whole thing I talked about earlier, where you're trying to right a wrong with another wrong. So I'd rather not put a name to it. Mark, I'm still in favor of your initial recommendation. I really like to stand firm on this. I'm really having a hard time. I think we just need to stand firm as hard as possible.
You know, I'm living my own pendulum here, and and I apologize for that, and especially for the external processing when I'm a professional at making a long meeting longer. So putting the name as number 4, as I originally said, is not helpful at all. And I do go back to intent. So, you know, if we want to send a statement, we need to send a statement. It needs to be a firm statement. And that is, here are the options, because we don't want to compound the problem. I think putting a name in there makes it easier for them if there's going to be sort of this call for a name, but why go there? So if it's, I'm going to go back to the original concept and go with the top three, and not list the Medal of Honor recipient.
okay.
As Jerry laid out.
You know, I can get behind that, Rosemary, because I think that's where I started originally, and I talked myself out of it because I'm a pro at making meetings longer myself. So there you go.
I
appreciate the top cover.
I will concur with Rosemary. I think,
Right.
and Jerry, I mean, we are making a recommendation to the full committee. If the full committee, they have the prerogative to accept or make adjustments. But this is where we are as the grassroots or the ground troops, so to speak, are coming from. Over.
Okay, I will go back to the original 4-2, right? Unless Nick says he wants to change his vote. I got Bob, you were with Holland, so I'm going to go down.
I'm going to change, Mark. I'm a no change Liberty Cedar. I'm aligned with that recommendation.
Okay, so you're a concur. All right, so 5-1. I'm gonna make a recommendation to the full committee. That the subcommittee makes a recommendation on Jackson Circle renaming of Jackson Circle, or no change, Liberty Circle, and Red Cedar Circle, with a vote of 5-1, with Ann Harrell not being involved right now. And we will, if we can, we'll catch her up because she's on the full committee anyway, I think. But it wouldn't change the recommendation because it would still be 5-2 over. And Nick and subcommittee members, we will add, Renee and I will add in the minutes how we deliberated and how we got to where we are. And then we'll make sure that everybody sees that as we get ready for the full committee meeting sometime in the future. Over.
Good
Renee,
job, Mark.
Renee, you want to steer us all straight if we've strayed over?
No, I need to confirm the 5-1 vote. I think the one against was Mr. Hess, if I'm not mistaken, for clarification.
Yeah, it wasn't that he was against. He just wanted to add a fourth name of Holland. Over.
Understood.
And did we meet the requirement? Will that language meet the requirement for a recommendation to the full committee, Renee?
That is correct. And for process orientation for everyone. You are a subcommittee. You will, the full committee has they'll receive both topics as topics to be presented to them. And then when we get to subcommittee reports, that's when the recommendation of the subcommittee will be provided. Over.
Okay, thank you, Renee. Before we adjourn, subcommittee members, the last thing I would like to discuss with you is if you can't do it today, then please think about it. What we would like to do now, as we're making recommendations on these two topics, I would like to open up the subcommittee discussion concerning new business that we want to take on or get updated on at Arlington. As most of you know, for the last year or so, we've been consumed by these topics, and we haven't been able to expand any new business for the Remember and Explore subcommittee. So I would ask you, if you have some now, please give them to us, and we'll jot them down, and we can take them to Renee and the full committee on items that the subcommittee would like to pursue in the future. Over.
Yeah, I'd like to see Arlington designated as a DoD high impact service provider under OMB authority, and I haven't seen anything around it, and so I'd like to understand what's the cemetery doing to implement some of the OMB guidance around high impact service providers that came out in the executive order. I think that's really important because it's about customer facing and customer service activities, and improving the customer experience is one of the presidential directives that has come out recently for the federal government all up. And I think because Arlington's in DoD, it's kind of been overlooked. And that was one of the reasons the committee was actually initially created, was it was overlooked. And so I'd like to figure out how we get that right.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Anybody else? You know, one topic that I will propose is, at last meeting, we all did kind of indicate that we wanted to hear more about the interpretation and the education program, because it did kind of tickle our fancy a little bit with the recent changes that they've done. And I think that's, and most of us in the subcommittee have been after that for a long time. We've seen it more from, a thought process and a beginning to where we're at now. But I think we need to stay on top of that because that is the media that we use to tell that history. And so I think we want to keep that on the forefront for us, or at least that would be my recommendation to the subcommittee members. Over.
Mark, that's exactly aligned to what I'm saying too, is like the whole customer experience is about the interpretive mission, the honor and remember subcommittee. Like, I think that's squarely within the charter. So yes, +1.
I see your hand up, Rose. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Not to beat a dead horse here, but we just got off the subject of renaming roads, and I'm not sure, Renee, are roads naming part of the Remember and Explore subcommittee? I kind of remember we went through this when we were doing the millennial. Is this something that we will be asked to do for the newer section, the
Other expansion?
southern expansion? If so, maybe we can start looking at that. I don't know if Arlington's even ready for us to start looking at that.
Yes, ma'am. That is road naming is part of master planning, and the committee is responsible to guide the cemetery in the areas of master planning. The full committee gave the subcommittee the task of looking at the road naming for Jackson Circle. When Southern Expansion, when we're ready to present the cemetery is ready to present potential naming. I believe there's 6, 7 roads that need to be named. 6 roads that need to be named at Southern Expansion. And so that will be coming in the coming months as we begin phase 2 of the project. And then the roads will be actually built in phase 3. Over.
Hey, Renee, thanks. So I saw Rose shaking her head. So what I would ask is that we put in the minutes that the subcommittee appreciates the work you did on the criteria for Jackson Circle, and we just keep that handy so that when we do get to the point of road naming for Southern Expansion, that list is certainly brought back forward of those highly qualified and highly eligible names that you provided us on that list. Over.
Understood.
Rosemary, I see you are trying to get in there. Over.
No, I'm good. I'm tracking the conversation, and I'm good. Thank you, Mark. Over.
Okay, thanks. Bob, Jerry, any comments for new business? Over, sir?
No,
No,
sir.
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks.
All right, Renee, I guess this concludes, excuse me, subcommittee's work, unless there's that you need us to address. Over.
No, I do, as the DFO, have to let you know that you have 2 members of the public that have their hands raised. But is business you've already discussed. That'd be Rear Admiral Robinson, and I believe, I can't tell who the other name is.
William Collins.
Mr. William Collins.
Okay, I'm okay. I'm okay if we listen to him. We got a few minutes. Let's give them a couple minutes to say what they need to say. You want to call them, Renee, or
Yes,
you
I
want
will.
me to?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Admiral Robinson, I believe your hand's listed as number 1.
Thank you very much. Just want to point out the fact that the NDAA 2022 specifically references the waiver of the 25-year period and was not read or shown to the subcommittee. It's an act of Congress and showed congressional concern to since the staff at Arlington National Cemetery had said, oh, the Secretary of the Army really can't waive the 25 years. Congress came back in a passage that was not read to you and said, oh no, we meant it can be waived. And that was totally ignored and was pointed out in the chat. And Mrs. Yates said, ignore. And that's number 1, because we heard that on the tape. And number 2, the other memorial that is for all chaplains is for all Army chaplains, does not represent Navy chaplains, and does not represent Air Force chaplains since the creation of the United States Air Force. It does represent Army Air Corps chaplains. And it's at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which is the home of the Army Chaplain School, not the Navy and not the Air Force. So there is no other memorial out there. So just for the record, I want it clear that we don't see that you were given the full story. Out here.
Chaplain Robinson, for the record, you're referencing the 2023 NDAA. We were asked to show the 2022. If you would like me to have the committee see the 23 NDAA, we can do that.
Yes.
If you got it, Renee, bring it up, please. Over.
I will ask Matt to show the 2023. Again, they all say the Secretary of the Army may, and so none of these supersede the Secretary of the Army's authorities as they're outlined, and she will make a final decision related to what changes are made to any monument or memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. Over.
100% concur. This does, however, show congressional concern. You just had it up and put it down.
Give him a minute, sir. No, share, try to reshare. There you go. You're good. In the committee and everyone see it. Oh, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to read this again or can everyone see it?
Well, I'm not going to comment on everyone. I can read it myself quite well, but I don't want to speak for everybody over.
I can see it. Thank you.
I can see it.
I can see it just.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I would just like to state to the subcommittee that I'll make a statement and then I'll ask anybody if they want to change their position. I don't think any of us have any doubt of the Secretary of the Army's authority to waive the 25-year requirement. I think what we decided in our deliberation and our vote was we want to leave that authority to the Secretary of the Army, not the subcommittee. Over. And with that said, does what we just read change anybody's vote on the recommendation to the full committee to number one and number two, as we stated, outside of the 25-year window? Over.
No.
Okay, I didn't see nobody's hand go up or non-concurrence. So we acknowledge your point, Admiral. Go ahead, Renee.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you, sir. I just want to make, there's still one hand, so I just want to, when you're complete, we have one more hand still showing.
Yeah, Roger, I just wanted to close the loop with Rear Admiral Robinson that acknowledged his comment. And I don't think, like I said, I'm speaking for the subcommittee. None of us are mistaken of the authority of the Secretary of the Army to waive that. We just want to leave it with him or her.
Mr. Farley, I concur that I simply wanted the record to be complete and accurate on those two issues. Number one, that there is no other memorial to all chaplains. It's not there, doesn't exist. And number two, that the Secretary of the Army, although was originally stated by ANC, did not have the authority. Congress clarified it, and that she does have the authority. I just wanted the record to be complete, and it is now complete, and I thank you for that, Mr. Farley.
Yes, sir. No problem, sir. Thank you. I should have made the comment about Fort Jackson because we did discuss that in August, and we knew it was the Army only. I failed to clarify that earlier when Bob asked that question, but thanks, sir, and appreciate it. Go ahead, Renee, on the second one. Over.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. William Collins, you have your hand up.
Yes, that's correct. I just have a couple points to make. First is that this has been a very time-consuming process for the committee, for the cemetery staff, for NCMEF personnel. It's been going on for years, and it's taken a lot of public time. And no one's getting younger in this process. I'm probably one of the youngest people working with NCMEF on this project. I'm 57. So this process is taking up a lot of time, and my point here is that we're at a juncture. When they closed out the end of OEF with our evacuation from Afghanistan, we're at a point now where updating the monument could hit a final point. And it was discussed at the last meeting about this being a closing juncture in the process, and that a new monument at some other location for all chaplains could be dedicated at some point, but that Chaplain's Hill could be kind of indexed and closed out with all faiths equally honored and recognized, which does not exist currently on the Hill because of the different time spans in which they are placed, to bring equity to all the faith groups that are represented there, to close out and index this process, because I know the cemetery very much likes to have things in amber and not have to be changed and updated. And we're the only perpetual monument. So these concerns about impact on other monuments doesn't exist. We are the only one currently that has a perpetual standing. And we can index and close this out very quickly if we do this now. the 25-year rule, and it's been mentioned before, I was on the committee at the time when that was passed, when we dedicated the Jewish Chaplains Monument. There's nothing special about that time. It was an arbitrary number that we picked just to kind of put into the legislation. And that's where we gave the Secretary the ability to waive that for that very reason. The people pointing out that the last name was identified as 2020. We can come back in 20 years. I'll still be around. I don't know about some of the other members, but I'll still certainly be around to do that if need be. But we're at a point where we could address all this once and for all and not have to have us coming back and doing this year after year after year as each name ticks off, and then have to spend all the money to recast these plaques over and over and over again if we can just do this now. But we're also hitting a window that could be closing on that process because we've got the Ford Carrier battle group heading to the Mediterranean right now. We could find ourselves in another conflict in which more, personnel and potentially even chaplains find themselves as combat casualties in that conflict if, God forbid, that would occur. So I think it would be imperative to act now to try and index this process, index Chaplains Hill with the end of OAF, LEF, and not risk some future leadership in NCMEF deciding to add the third Middle East conflict, casualties to that list because we waited too long. And now all of a sudden, people who don't remember the history we've got to this point are now trying to, again, perpetuate the monument. If you act now, you can close out and index this process, and we can move forward with another monument at another location to dedicate to all chaplains because, again, the faith groups are more greatly expanded now. There are Muslim chaplains, there are Buddhist chaplains. The right thing to do is to honor all of them at some point in some way in the future, but God, fortunately, we don't have any of them, needing to be honored at this point. So I think now would be the time if you're going to make a recommendation to recommend the Secretary. And again, it's not taking authority you don't have. You have the ability to make a recommendation. That's all it is. Secretary, we recommend that you exercise your ability to waive this so that we can index this, close this out, and be done with this process and move on to use our time for more valuable projects for Arlington Cemetery. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your input and that insight. Okay, subcommittee members, anybody have any comment on those two public comments we just heard? Over. I hear nothing, so we'll make sure that those comments are in the minutes, and when the recommendations take it to the full committee, they'll have that in the record so they can hear Mr. Collins' point of view when they make their recommendation. So subcommittees at this time, is anybody have anything else outside of these two topics that they would like to discuss at today's meeting? And if not, then do I have a motion to adjourn? Over.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
The motion.
Okay. Ms. Renee, I think we have a carried motion that we adjourn for today. Subcommittee members, thank you very much for your time. Another great meeting with this great group, and we'll get this all done and wrapped up and the minutes done so you can review them. And based on my conversations with our DFO team at Arlington, we'll probably look for a meeting sometime in the next couple months of the full committee to do a meeting sometime before the end of the year is what I'm hearing right now. So thank you all, and I'll go on mute if Renee, you got any guidance for all of us. Over.
Well done, Mark.
Yeah, +1. Well done, Mark. Thank you.
Great
Thanks,
job,
team.
all. Great job, all.
Renee, any comments from you? Over, ma'am?
No, sir. I appreciate the team and everybody's time.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Renee. Thank you, Matt.
Let us know if you need anything.
Yeah, we'll be in touch with everybody. Thanks. Y'all have a good one. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.